Just so you know, our agenda, I'm going to do a quick round of introductions, and so far 3 of our 4 panelists are here. And then Crystal Hitchings is going to talk a little bit about DownEast Acadia regional tourism, and then we will move into our panel discussion. And from there, in our closing, not only will I thank our panelists, but I will also talk about the next panel that will be happening in April and a contest that we're starting. I think I'm going to actually kick it off tomorrow after this panel discussion has wrapped up. So without any further ado, let me introduce our panelists. And actually, let me first introduce Crystal, being that she will be the next person to talk. You know, I don't know what Crystal Hitchings' title really is. She'll tell you that. She's like the person who keeps us all in check when it comes to DownEast Acadia regional tourism. If it wasn't for her, I'd be totally lost as the marketing chair. So I appreciate her, and she can fill you in more on that. Alex, hopefully I'm going to get it right. Alex Clavery is one of our panelists. I purposely asked Alex to be part of this because he's my neighbor, and I know he is new to this area of Maine. He is new to having a saltwater boat, and although his boat is hidden right now in his, I don't even know what to call that thing, Alex, because we walked down by your house the other day. Normally, I get to see his boat every time I walk down our road. He's off of a side road. So that's how Alex got invited, and you'll hear a little bit more from each of the panelists when we get started. I don't think Karen is here yet, but hopefully she will join us. She is from Castine Kayak Adventures. And I have to admit, I am not a kayaker, so I'm really looking forward to this one. Christina Haslett is from the Maine Island Trail Association. And I never even knew they existed until Crystal told me about it. So I'm excited about this as well. And then Jamie Robertson, who is from Robertson Sea Tours and Adventures. And I have been following them for a couple of years because one day, Jamie, I will end up going out with you guys to see the puffins. So hang on for a second before we get to our panelists. We're going to turn it over to Crystal first.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Crystal Hitchings. I work for Sunrise County Economic Council and for DownEast Acadia Regional Tourism. And the work that I do is in keeping Alvion and Teresa straight and helping to tell the story about how amazing this place is and helping to help visitors find new and interesting ways to learn about this place, experience the place, and truly understand the personality and stories. And so DownEast Acadia Regional Tourism, short or long for DART, is a collaboration of organizations that support and promote tourism and recreation in Washington and Hancock counties, which are together known as the DownEast Acadia region. DownEast Acadia is one of the 8 tourism regions in the state of Maine, and DART is the regional marketing organization for DownEast Acadia. And we work in close partnership with the Maine Office of Tourism to develop a marketing plan and promote this region. 2 very important functions of DART are to highlight those most quintessential experiences of DownEast Acadia that make it the special place that it is and a special place for people to experience, and helping travelers discover the beautiful natural areas of the region and the incredible outdoor adventures that are to be had here, no matter how active or skilled you might be. And finally, to help travelers understand the underlying natural and cultural stories of the place and the people that they interact with when they visit us. So I'm excited to hear your stories from our panelists this evening and glean some ideas from you about how to continue assisting other people to come here and find their own fun ways to be safe and experience this region. So thank you for sharing with us tonight.
So what I'm going to do with our first question is I'm going to go in alphabetical order of first names. And I'd like you to answer the question, but before that, if you want to tell us a little bit more about you and your organization, if that is applicable, before we get into that answer. And Alex, that means I'm going to put you on the spot first because your name starts with an A. And my first question, besides the introduction piece, is how do you decide where to boat in the area?
Yeah, so my name, like Teresa said, is Alex Clavery. I've lived in Perry since 2018, came here for work. And before that, I was living in Michigan, but I'm from Exeter, Maine, which is up north of Bangor. And I got into boating here just because I figured if I was going to live here, I was going to make the most of it. So I wanted to get out on the ocean. And I guess the way that I choose where I'm going to go, I mean, there's not a whole lot that goes into it. It's just locally. So I stay close by. I stay in Cobscook Bay or Passamaquoddy Bay for the most part. Last year, we used to, well, the year before last, we used to go out by Campobello Island a lot to whale watch. We didn't get over there this year because of COVID, and they were a little more strict on boating in Canadian waters. So I just stayed in the US side.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
Christina.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks, Teresa and Crystal, for the introduction, for being here. Happy to chat with everyone and answer any questions that anyone has about the Maine Island Trail Association, or what we typically say MITA here. And so I work for MITA. I'm the DownEast Regional Stewardship Manager, which there's 3 stewardship managers at MITA. And so my area is kind of this DownEast area. It's basically from Blue Hill Bay all the way to Cobscook Bay. So the Maine Island Trail Association, just for a little history, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is a nonprofit organization based in Portland, but covering the whole length of the coast. And we partner with landowners who own islands along the coast of Maine, and they want to have their islands be open for public access. And so we sort of create these handshake agreements with landowners where, you know, if they allow folks to come and use their islands for camping or day use, or, you know, whatever, however they best see fit, then we offer stewardship services, which is kind of in the form of a lot of like marine trash pickup and trail maintenance, and, you know, any other way that we can help out the landowner in maintaining these places and allowing them to be, you know, used by the public. And so there's over 240 islands stretching the whole coast that are part of the trail. Yeah, I'm sure I'll have a chance to talk a little more about that later on. But back to the question at hand, where I choose to go boating, that's an interesting question. I think first I have to ask, what boat am I going out in? So that typically will help kind of guide my my thoughts a little bit. So depending, you know, if I'm going out in a kayak, it's much more limited than sailboat or motorboat. And so really knowing, you know, where you can go in whatever vessel is obviously an important point. But for me, it really, I would say it's also quite simple as far as like, where do I want to explore? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about Maine, is that you could spend a lifetime gunk-holing all around the coast and you wouldn't see everything. So, you know, it's great to kind of like take out a chart and like look around and see like, this looks like a cool spot, or looking at different areas and deciding, you know, where is a place that I really want to see. And that's, I would say that's sort of my like divining rod in the first stages of asking that question. And then, you know, as the details formulate a little more, there's more planning that goes into it, but that's how I typically go about it.
Thanks, Christina. And you've given me some great follow-up questions, but I want Jamie to go ahead and introduce himself and answer that question. How do you decide where to boat?
Jamie Robertson, Robertson Sea Tours and Adventures, 6-passenger charter boat, which we started this crazy idea about 20 years ago, and slowly built ourselves to the point where we're fairly busy every summer. We focus on puffins, and so cutting right to the point, when the puffins are out, we're headed to Petit Island to see the puffins. That's the big draw for tourism and for Maine people as well, to view the puffins. We have a unique cruise. We hit a lot of aspects. We see 3 lighthouses on the cruise. We see seals, eagles, osprey, a lot of wildlife. So it's not just puffins, a lot of different pelagic species we see. So obviously with my tourism, where I'm going to boat is where I find the most wildlife.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. And I want to see Karen. I don't see your name with the last name I'm used to. If you're here, let us know, please. And I have put a question out in chat. If anybody has any questions for our panelists, please type them in and we will ask them towards the end, or if they fit in to one of our other conversations. But I'm going to go through my canned questions first. And this is kind of an open question. Do you ever boat or kayak alone? And if so, let's talk a little bit about safety, because, visitors may come up and they're the only one who wants to kayak, or in my husband's case, I don't kayak, so he might get stuck going by himself. So let's talk about the safety of boating alone.
Same order.
I don't know who boats alone, so whoever wants to start gets to start it off for us.
So I go out alone periodically, and there's a lot of safety concerns anyway, especially in the area that I'm in. There's a tremendous amount of currents due to the high tidal range. So there's a lot to consider when you're out boating. When I'm going alone, I think the biggest thing is that if I were to go overboard, there's nobody else. There's nobody to help me. So I think about that a lot. I'll wear a life jacket in the boat when I'm out alone because of that. I don't when there's other people in the boat. But it's just, for me, it's thinking through what could happen and being prepared for those situations.
Christina, Jamie?
Yeah, I can certainly speak a little bit to that. I do boat alone as well, both kind of for work. We have 18-foot aluminum skiffs that are pretty seaworthy, but there is a multitude of kind of preparation that you need to do and kind of safety protocol that we do when we go out by ourselves. But I've also gone kayaking alone, and yeah, again, it's very much a question of preparedness and having the right equipment, I would say. And so starting off, knowing where you're going and when you're going. And I highly recommend, especially if you're going for a multi-day paddling trip or an overnight, to write up a float plan and leave it with someone. Or maybe if you're just going out for a few hours, that's something you can find templates online, and it basically just, you can leave it with a relative or friend or anyone. And, if you're not back by a certain time, then people know that you're not back by a certain time. So that's kind of right off the bat, something easy you can do. But having the right equipment, PFD, a whistle, a radio, a GPS, a chart. There's a whole laundry list of things that typically you can find kind of on a Coast Guard website that give you a good idea of what safety equipment is available and out there for you to use. And just, I guess, the note again about the preparedness is really planning your day. You know, I'm not going to go out alone when it's blowing 20 knots. So there are sometimes when I plan to go out, but the weather is really, you know, it's a bit iffy, and I kind of know my limits, and I am much more conservative if I'm going to be going by myself because, you know, as Alex said, there's really no one else out there when you're out there. And so it just becomes just a little more risky. So yeah, I would say preparedness and kind of monitoring the weather and knowing your own threshold for, you know, what you're able to do and how far you're willing to kind of like push yourself as far as your kind of risk aversion. But it's really gratifying, you know, to go out and visit an island by yourself as well. So there's a total different experience when you're out by yourself. And I wouldn't by any means say don't do it. It's just, yeah, a matter of being safe. So.
And Jamie, I know from looking at your website, you have kids and you have dogs and you have a wife. So do you ever even get a chance to go out alone?
No, never. I wish I did. Yeah, I'm not on the boat alone very often. The kind of my track record, I've been a commercial fisherman, commercial scallop diver. I fished offshore for lobsters on the deck of a boat, done urchins, done the charter boat business with passengers and my family. So yeah, I'm usually with somebody, but usually I'm responsible for everybody. So to follow up on what everybody has kind of been saying is preparedness is the essential if you're going to go out in these waters. Unfortunately, I have seen kayakers and small boaters get in trouble because I'm on the water all the time, especially during the summer, during tourist season. I've helped kayakers who are in distress, small boaters who got themselves in trouble. Specifically where I run is, but we call it Petite Manan Island. Locals call it Petite Manan Island. That was one of the questions. It was named by Champlain when he sailed the coast, so it's French. Means small island at sea. But out there, it is 3 miles from mainland, from the nearest point of mainland. It's 12 miles from where I run. And there's a lot of current out there. You get a lot of sea out there at times and a lot of wind. And I have seen kayakers get in trouble out there. So be very aware of the weather, monitor the weather very closely, know your own limits, and do some research on where you're going, because currents vary from bay to bay and from you know, time of day. Know the tides, know the size of the tides, what the drain of the tide is, because that affects the current a great deal. All those factor into being safe on the water.
So I'm glad we're focusing on safety because that's actually the next question. And I want to talk about it this way because I can tell some of the people who are on here are local because I recognize names, or, you know, the Cala's Visitor Information Center. And some of the people who are on here may not be local, and some of the people, especially who are watching the recording, may not be local. So what is your best advice to visitors beyond the typical boat and kayak safety of you know, having a fire extinguisher and wearing a life jacket, when they're coming to this area and wanting to get out on the water for the first time in our area? And Jamie, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you and then work our way back through the panel.
Okay. Honestly, the first thing I would say is ask somebody, seek help, do some research. Don't be afraid to ask. I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen people come into the area and they maybe do some online research. But when you get into a local area, they don't really talk to anybody or ask the locals. And believe it or not, they're willing to give you some information and make sure you're going to be okay. Nobody wants to see anybody get in trouble or get hurt. And so that is the greatest resource, are the people that are on the water all the time. So don't be afraid as somebody coming in and visiting this area. Hey, you know what? Ask some questions, because you'll get a lot of help that way. And if I wish more people could do one thing, that would be it right there.
Thank you. Christina, you're up next, because I'm going to leave Alex for the last, because Alex, I'm going to give you a special addition to this question.
Yeah, I would agree, really entirely with Jamie there, in that like there is a lot of value in the local wisdom and local knowledge of those places. And so specifically, I think, if you're going to a new place where you haven't boated before, I would seek out either a guide service or, a kayaking guide service. And they typically have a wealth of knowledge, even if you may not be, renting gear from them. Like Jamie said, these folks want to see everyone safe and enjoy themselves. So seeking out that local knowledge and really doing your research beforehand, when you're at home. And sometimes that's part of like the fun of the trip, is planning it. So being able to take some time and really, look at tide charts and look at, the current charts and see, what's the weather going to be like there when you're going to be there. And for me, seems like maybe about getting as much information as you can, so you can be fully prepared for that trip.
And Alex, that special question is, I know your experience is more freshwater and saltwater is a little bit newer for you. So if you can also draw in that comparison as you answer the question.
Yeah, so I was gonna echo what Jamie said and Christina said, was asking people. I was fortunate enough I work with a couple of people that are also commercial fishermen, and they're out on the water in this area all the time. So, I got a huge amount of information just talking to them. I also did a lot of research, and the biggest difference is there's really not nearly as much for currents on freshwater. Lakes, you don't have to think about that so much. The other thing that is a bigger thing for this area, at least, is fog. The fog can roll in quite quickly, and you need to be prepared for that. One of the things that my boat, when I bought it, didn't have radar on it, and so I installed it. It was one of the things that I really wanted before I used it much, for that reason, because I knew the fog rolled in here quickly. And we had boated down to Lubec one time, and we're having supper there, and it was a nice, warm, sunny afternoon, and all of a sudden a fog bank rolled in, and we had to boat home in the fog. But luckily I had the radar, and it was not an issue. So that's something that the weather can change pretty quickly in Maine in general, and on the water for sure, and it makes a huge difference to your safety.
Yeah, actually,
Thank you.
One other thing
ahead.
sort of struck me as I, after I finished speaking, but I think something that we at MITA see sometimes and maybe deal with is, especially folks who maybe are coming from out of state or just somewhere farther away where they're not as familiar with like the water, is making sure whatever vessel you're using is safe for these conditions. I think sometimes folks will bring really small open kayaks that maybe are fine for the lake in Western Maine where they usually recreate, and they're going to visit Lubec and they take their kayak with them, but it might not be the safest choice for that particular area. So that is definitely something to keep in mind, and scales up as well to power boats. Yeah, just same sort of awareness there, I think.
Well, Karen just joined us, and we're going to switch to kayaking in 1 minute, but I want to give our non-kayakers a chance to answer this next question before we move to more about kayaking, and that is, Jamie's mentioned fishing, Alex has mentioned fishing. You know, I'm relatively new to Maine. I actually moved here probably a few months before Alex and Monique moved here. And I've never honestly gone out fishing. What do visitors, especially non-Maine residents, need to know about fishing, lobstering, etc. on salt water that they might not be aware of?
I'll jump in and start. So I guess coming from my perspective, I get a lot of people that are interested in the lobster fishing aspect. And unless you have a connection of somebody local who lobster fishes, and you know you're friends with them or whatnot, your best bet is to seek out a boat that does lobster fishing tours. And speaking from somebody that's coming from away. Of course, if you want to fish yourself for lobsters, you can get a non-resident, non-commercial 5-trap license. You have to have a boat, obviously, and 5 traps. And then that all comes into play about what we just talked about as far as knowing your area, knowing the weather conditions. And then you've got to deal with knowing who you're fishing around. Because as you may have heard, lobster fishermen can be territorial, and it's a tough go. But when there's a small bay and a lot of traps in, so there's a lot to lobster fishing. As far as any other saltwater fishing, where we are on the coast, there's not great sport fishing. That being said, I usually have some fun when the mackerel are running. Pollock, kids love that. We will catch a few striped bass, although they're not great in our area. If you run way offshore, there's a chance for tuna fish, but that's a whole nother game with the tuna fishing. So I guess that's my best input for saltwater fishing.
Anybody else? Alex?
Yeah, Jamie answered that well, I think. I don't have much to add.
Yeah, I have like no experience fishing, so not.
Yeah, I grew up in New York.
So I can't offer.
Sorry, Christina, say that again.
That I've never been very successful, though I've tried, so I can't offer any real stellar advice.
So I grew up in New York and also fished on the Jersey Shore. Do we have like flounder up here?
You go Eastport, you can catch a few flounder. Again, for flounder, mostly it's not shore fishing. You got to have a boat to do it. There is some shore fishing. Again, I go to Eastport. I know you can go off the pier and fish for mackerel and pollock. Sometimes you catch dogfish and whatnot. But also, again, going back to asking some locals, they'll point you where to go. If you want to fish for, say, striped bass, they can tell you, okay, striped bass are running over in the Melbridge River off the bridge right now. If you go out there on an outgoing tide, and cast off the southern shore, you may have a good chance to catch something. Things like that for shoreline fishing.
Yeah, I think the question about just the license in the chat, and maybe someone else knows, but I think anyone can get a saltwater license from the state of Maine. I think it's $1 is my understanding. So,
yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah,
But,
you, I think are supposed to have a license.
but crab would be the same as the lobster license that Jamie mentioned. It's you can get a non-commercial 5-trap license. It's a combo crab lobster license.
Yep.
That's what I
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, crab is considered a bycatch of the lobster, and that goes in the same license.
All right, so let's switch to kayaking a little bit more. And Jamie and Alex, I'm not sure if you're kayakers. I know Karen and Christina do kayak. So this might be more of the ladies than the gentlemen this time. And I'm going to use this first question as our introduction to Karen. So I'm going to ask Karen to introduce herself and answer the question. But the first question actually comes to us from the Calais Visitors Information Center. And I love this question because having my first experience up here was visiting Campobello, and my family's house is on the water, and watching these sea kayakers out there on these kayaks, knowing the currents and the water temperature and all of this. But what's your advice to somebody who's coming up here, whether they're an in-state visitor or an out-of-state visitor, and now they're up here on the Bay of Fundy system, trying to take their sea kayak out? What's your best advice to kayakers in the area, new kayakers in the area? And Karen, we'll start off with you.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I apologize for being late. I was under the impression it was at 7 and was playing on a little scooter with a neighbor child out in the front yard, actually. I own Casting Kayak Adventures. I've been running my company for this will be my 24th season. And one of the things that I've done throughout my career is try to educate people about the safety of kayaking. And I want people to love kayaking, but there's a lot to know about kayaking. And as you say, Campobello, I run whale trips in Campobello Island. We go there in September, and I take only experienced kayakers in that water. That's, there's a 22-foot tide there. There's a lot of tide and current. So, when someone I heard, was it Christina, I think, talking about, having the right boat. Number one thing, if you're paddling on the ocean, your boat should have sealed bulkheads, bow and stern. So you should have flotation in the front and flotation in the back, because if your boat tips over, it's going to fill with water. So a recreation boat that doesn't have sealed compartments really just absolutely doesn't ever belong on salt water. It really belongs on water in a pond or a lake or near land, because if it flips over. And if you're in the Bay of Fundy, if you're in Campobello, that current will sweep you quite far, quite quickly. So you really want to know how to read the water and how to take advantage of current and understand the tides. And I actually have a group of people that would like me to take them this year, but the week that they want to go, the tide is wrong. So I really need the tide to be going out, and then I need the tide to be coming back in, because there's a lot of current. So we just can't really do it. So I'm like, we'll have to do that another year. So everything is very tidal. So I think the thing that I would tell people that come to Maine is we have some of the most amazing paddling. We have some of the most amazing places. But do yourself a favor, hire a guide and enjoy some beautiful places. And I'm not saying that just because I am a guide. We run a series of like a 3-part series where people come on 2 half-day trips and they do a rescue. And that way they have fun and they get skills, and then they know how to re-enter their boat. And then at that point, then they might want to get some local knowledge and talk about where they want to go. We also run some 2-day courses that are more advanced, and we do Sunday sojourns where we go somewhere different every Sunday on full-day trips. And when you go on trips like that in different places, that's the way to really understand what's going on. I actually did a private lesson today with someone who just bought a property in the salt pond in Blue Hill, and maybe she's on here. And I was very impressed. It's very early in the season. I would not have taken someone out on the ocean this early. But it's still salt water, and there's still current. And when we first started, I made a point of bringing 2 really good sea kayaks that have sealed bulkheads, bow and stern. And I wore a dry suit. I wore proper clothing. And we saw someone out there paddling in a recreation boat with their paddle upside down, leaning back. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And there's a lot of current there. And if you tipped over, you could end up going through Blue Hill Falls because the tide was going out. So this is cold, dynamic water, but beautiful. So take advantage of all the guides that we have along the coast of Maine that want to share what they do and really learn how to kayak. So yeah, that was a very long
Right,
answer.
Chris.
I've been preaching.
Well, it's the first time. It's the first time we heard from you so far. So,
Yeah, sorry.
Christina, what would you add?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know if there is a lot to add there. I would say very much the same thing. I mean, it's a tough question in the way that it's framed. If someone shows up, in Lubeck and saying they've never paddled before, that is a really hard spot to show up and say you've never paddled before. If it was somewhere else, maybe there are some safe, smaller areas, but that particular area of the coast is frankly just, there are a lot of risks there, and I would say just much more dangerous for the inexperienced paddler. And so it's kind of a bummer to say, don't go. But I would totally recommend, if there's a guide, absolutely take advantage of that, going out on a guided, couple hour tour or 1 day tour. Or, if that's not available, maybe there are some other options to get out on the water, going out, on more of like a motorboat tour, like a sightseeing tour where you get out and you're able to enjoy it, but maybe taking the risk factor out of it and, going out by yourself or with folks who have never are unfamiliar with the area in a kayak, just because it is inherently more, more dangerous. But yeah, I think Karen covered well all the bases. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think when people come to visit, some of the first people that they come to are the innkeepers or the people who are renting the Airbnb houses. This person that I worked with today is renting an Airbnb house. And what I really appreciated about what she wanted to do is she really wanted to understand her water so that she really knew. And as I went along the shoreline, I actually paddled on my own after that to just check out the whole area. And there were a lot of kayaks along the shoreline. And I can bet that those kayaks are at Airbnbs. And I bet that those kayaks are being lent to people that don't know what they're doing. So if you go to a place and people put stuff out for you, you think it's okay. So I think as Mainers and restaurant owners and inn owners, we want our people to have a really good experience. That's why we have registered Maine guides. That's why we have boat captains and they have licenses so that that they're doing things safe. We want our tourists to have a great, safe experience. So, when you're that Airbnb owner, you could say, there are these places that we recommend. Just like on my website, I recommend places for people to stay. And these are the activities that we suggest, that you do with this level of skill. So we're doing them a favor. So even in Castine, we have a 3-knot current that goes through there all day. So we don't rent kayaks to people at our waterfront, only if they've really paddled with us and we really know them. So I think we're doing them a big favor. I think that's an important part of DART is we want to promote good tourism and have people leave having had an amazing experience. And local knowledge is the best. So the more that all our local people really know what we have, we don't want to scare people from kayaking. We want to send them to the places that they can go where someone can really show them a really nice time. Or like, I think Christina, sending them to a pond, if you want to go, kick around in a boat, go somewhere really safe, but the ocean is cold and it can be safe if you know what you're doing. Yeah.
So let's talk about whether we have a lot of people moving to the area all along the DART region. You have people like me who I've been here for 3 years or so, and I've never been out on a kayak. I've never been out on a private boat. I've been out on some whale watching trips. And then you have visitors who are coming from all over. Where is the best information for people to find out? I'll be honest, Jamie, the only way I found out about you is from a hairdresser who I was talking to about wanting to go out with my dad and his, for lack of a better term, my stepmother. They were coming up from Florida and they wanted to go puffin watching. And somebody told me about you. Where do you get all the information that can be passed on to the newbie kayakers, the visitors, the newbie, want to go out on a boat. And we're going to start alphabetically on this one. So Alex, we'll start with you.
Well, for me, like I said, it was talking to people that had been out just locally. As far as somebody just visiting, it would be, I don't know, Dart maybe, just, I don't know. There's local, the Eastport has a whale watching tour, and just talking with those folks, probably if you're looking for something different, they would know.
Thank you. Christina.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm struggling a little bit to think of like a specific place to send someone for, all the information. But yeah, if someone's just visiting for a week or whatever it happens to be, I would say whatever the local kind of municipality tourist center is probably your best bet for information that is geared towards visitors and folks who, may or may not have any experience. But folks who have just moved here and are looking to like build on some knowledge and really start to learn a place, that's also a good starting point. Yeah, I mean, it would really depend on, again, the kind of activity you're looking to do. I feel like we keep saying this over and over again, but the local knowledge is really key. Reaching out to folks within those circles. If you are interested in kayaking, go to a guide service. They'll be able to connect you with maybe some other folks in the area who go out, and sometimes there's meetups for these kind of groups, and you're able to go out and kind of gain the skills from other people and get some of that local knowledge in that way. So yeah, that would be sort of my suggestion without any specifics.
And Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, the local knowledge definitely, not to keep pounding that drum, but that definitely is a big part of it. For me, I guess to give you, I've been at this for 20 years, and the web has obviously kind of transformed over 20 years. And I've done everything as far as advertising on different websites, local links. I don't do like Google. I'm 6-passenger. And how it worked for me, honestly, is, I started out real small and kind of had to work my way into my business, supported my business with commercial fishing and raking blueberries and substitute teaching, whatever I had to do to make it work. And then about 4 years into it, it kind of took off. And a lot of it has to do with word of mouth and your local knowledge. And, just like you said, you heard from me from a hairdresser. And at this point, I was just saying this to somebody for like my business, I'm almost on autopilot now. I honestly don't do a lot of advertising. Like I said, I prefer not to do the Google. I find that, you start paying for that stuff, and it's kind of like a never ending well that you keep having to dip into. Your local area chamber of commerce is also a great, a great place to seek out information. Machias, DownEast region doesn't have a chamber of commerce per se. Ellsworth, I've hooked up with over the years. Schoodic area chamber of commerce, all great sources. A lot of people that come into these areas, that's where they go, is to the chamber of commerce, and you get a lot of links of businesses there.
Thank you. And Crystal has put a few links in there as well. So thank you for that, Crystal. Karen.
Yeah, the Maine Tourism Association. I think when people search an area and they search what they want to do. And Jamie, it was fun to hear how you started, because I kind of did the same thing, where you had all these part-time jobs that kind of supported your business growing. And then you just provide a good service, and people know that they have a good time when they go with you, and that you offer a quality trip, and then they want to come back. I've had innkeepers that drive their customers to us because they know they're going to have a good time, and it's always reliable. TripAdvisor can be a good one. We get a lot of references from that, just from people coming and having a good time. But if you're really wanting to kayak, I think, you know, coming back to what Christina said is, you know, local guides. Most of us run, we guide because we love the sport and we want to share the sport. So most of us run workshops that really help people to shorten the learning curve. So,
And how do you find a guide?
how do you find a guide? Well, we have an organization called the Maine Sea Kayak Guides Association, called MASKI, M-A-S-KGI, Maine Association of Sea Kayak Guides and Instructors. And it's an organization that came together probably 20 years ago. And it's really awesome because we all know each other and we all work together. And so if you're coming from Portland, you'll probably go out with Portland Kayak. And then, you know, if you're going to come up to the Castine area, Zach will say, hey, you should go out with Castine Kayak, or, you know, so we love people to, you know, to enjoy the coastline with people who really know the area. Every single bay that we have in Maine is dynamic. And each one has a different, you know, different things that you want to consider in that local knowledge. And, you know, I truly believe, and I've been offering classes for a long time, that if you take, like right now I have coming up in May, I do a 5-day Maine Sea Kayak Guide prep course. And I also teach it as an advanced sea kayaker course. So some people take it so that they learn everything they need to know. We do navigation, we do tides and current, we do wind and waves, we do, you know, dealing with conditions, trip planning, camping, leave no trace. You know, if you do something that's somewhat comprehensive like that, then you really are empowered. You know, and you're not empowered just to paddle here, you're empowered to paddle in Mexico or Panama, or, you know, I lead trips to other places too. So that knowledge goes a lot of places. So sometimes I feel like people don't get to do as much as they might like to do because they don't take the time to learn enough of what they should know. So if you take that time, you know, and this year we're really targeting it, because we know last year everybody wanted to be on the water and we want them to have a great time and be out there safely. So we're doing, every Sunday we're doing full day trips where we're gonna trip plan and do stuff along the way. So people are really learning. And on Wednesdays, we'll do full day trips out of Castine. And we're gonna offer rescue classes, just short nobody ever wants to practice rescue. So we're just gonna do short 2-hour rescue clinics. We're making them really cheap because if you know how to re-enter your boat, is so empowering. Because then
That's actually a great segue to Terry's question, which I didn't want to leave for the last question, but we're going to do a rapid round robin on this one. Most frightening thing that has ever happened. Alex, any frightening stories?
Nothing major. I guess my wife was frightened one time. I still felt okay, but going through Lebec Channel under the bridge, there's a tremendous amount of current there, and coming back through against the current, it moves your boat around quite a bit. So I would say that was for me.
Christina?
Yeah, no, I mean, happily nothing major, I guess I would say. But yeah, a number of years back, I was doing a longer paddle along the coast. And I think paddling over Petite Minian Bar, which is kind of a point between the point and like the island, it is a very sketchy part of the water. There's just waves coming at you from every which way. It's just kind of a strange conditions. And it was, you know, it was just a frightening moment of the paddle, I suppose. You know, nothing happened, but I can tell you I was holding on to my paddle white knuckled for a good 10 minutes or so until I got over that bar.
That's a challenging part at the wrong tide, or
yeah, no, yeah,
water for that paddle.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
but
wow.
Jamie?
I'll keep it to tourism, I guess, because I could give you a few examples, but probably I like to say I never get scared, but probably the thing that had me on alert the most, I was about 23 miles off on a whale watch, and we had 2 thunder and lightning storms, 2 big storms that had actually passed by us, and we got the okay to go, and we went offshore, and unfortunately those 2 storms actually came together, collided, and created one big storm which spun off right at us. So I was 22 miles offshore, and we had a major wind and gale advisory come up on the radio, with, you know, gusts up to 80 to 90 miles per hour. And it was not good. And so I had another boat that was accompanying me. And so what I had everybody do, I just said, we're going to go west. The storm was coming at us from the north heading south. And so I said, we're going to go west as fast as we can and try to get around this sucker. And we managed to do it. We went west and we went way out around, and we ended up coming up back through Patipman. We were, by the time we went from Jonesport to Winter Harbor offshore and then came back home that way, they managed to avoid everything. But it was pretty hairy for a while.
Thank you, Karen.
That was a great story. And it really points to the fact that you have to always like really be taking all the conditions into account and know a lot about what's going on with them, because you had to make some really good choices. I think the one that I'll share is, I kind of went to a whitewater thing, but it's a little off topic, so I'll do an ocean one. I was guiding a trip in Castine, and we had stopped on Holbrook Island for lunch, and the water was unbelievably gorgeous and glass calm, and we were taking pictures, and it was like nothing you've ever seen before. And when you see that calm before a storm, it's a really real thing. And we ended up, I could see that it was just changing, and there was this huge humidity that came in, and you could just tell that everything was changing. And of course, I got on the radio to see if they were, you know, doing any broadcasts about anything that was coming. And we had a microburst that was moving up the coast that had come out of nowhere. And so I told my adventurers that were with me, we went up into the barn, and actually there was a ranger who was she was from Presque Isle, and she was one of the rangers for Holbrook Island Sanctuary. And she was getting ready to get in her boat. And I said, I don't think you should get in that boat. And she said, well, I'm just going to go to the shore on the other side. And I said, I don't think you should do that. I think you should come up to the barn with us. And she said, I said, we're going to have a really big storm, and you might be in the middle when it hits. And so we went up to the barn, and literally, I mean, it started hailing, and it blew in the doors of the barn, and we had to push a big picnic table up against it, and it took out part of a tree. And I'm in the barn, and I'm going, oh my gosh, my paddles. I had left my paddles on the dock, and I'm like, my paddles are going to blow away. And the wind went right over them, and nothing happened to them. And we've had some of those microbursts happen. So you have to really be on top of storms. So, and then after that, the whole thing stopped, and it was calm. Yeah.
I gotta admit, I'm surprised nobody talked about getting like dunked in the water and as cold as our water is, because I might know somebody who might have gotten trapped at the Campobello Lighthouse, even though she had a house there for 20 plus years and never looked at a tide clock and had to wade. Any advice on if you do get a little wet and hypothermia?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer? Are you going?
Sure.
So hypothermia is really probably one of the biggest risk factors we have. I mean, people even in Florida can get hypothermia. You can get hypothermia in the tropics. But if you do end up in the water, the number one thing that you want to know is, and that's why we teach rescue classes, you want to know what your capability is. So if you're someone who can use a paddle float, if you can roll, and I can roll my boat, but I still always carry a paddle float and a pump. I always have a backup plan, because when my face hits that really cold water, I may or may not roll. You know, I hope I'll roll, but that might be too cold. So you want to have practiced the skills to be able to re-enter your boat. And you need your boat to be able to hold air. So if your boat fills with water and you get in your boat, you're going to be really, really cold. So you need to get the water out. So you carry a pump to pump the water out, and you have sealed bulkheads, bow and stern. And you should be able to get into your boat in under a minute. And you don't want to do it really fast. You just want to make sure you can get into your boat. And if you can't do that on your own, then you learn partnership rescues. And it's easier for two people to rescue each other, but they have to actually paddle together and stay together. So it's very easy to rescue another boat that has sealed bulkheads, bow and stern, and get someone into a boat. So if you don't master getting in on your own, then you should always make sure you paddle with a friend. You should paddle within your ability. And if you can't do either of those, which I've never had anyone that I couldn't teach a way to get into their boat effectively, then you should paddle in calm water when it's warm and stay near land and not be out you should paddle based on your skills. And the other way to really help with hypothermia is to never wear cotton. We say cotton kills because cotton holds coldness and wetness to your body. So even in the wintertime, if you were wearing blue jeans and I was wearing synthetic clothing and we walked outside on a cold winter day, you would be colder than I would be. And certainly in the ocean water, cotton holds coldness to your body. Synthetic fabrics wick it away. So actually, I don't have any cotton on at all. This is what I wore earlier to paddle. And everything I wear is synthetic. And if you did really go in the water, you want to have spare clothing with you and get to land and get out of the wet clothing and put new clothing on to avoid hypothermia. So there's a couple of things.
All right. Thank you, Karen. And we have about just under 15 minutes left. So I'm going to give you a couple of questions before we get into a wrap up. And we're going to start with the power boat people first. So Alex and Jamie, prettiest place to take your boat? If you're here with a personal watercraft, where would you say is a must-see?
For me, like I said earlier, I tend to stay right nearby. I haven't been out in the open ocean for really a lot of the reasons we talked about, knowing your abilities and limitations. So I stay pretty much in the bays, but I really haven't been in an area around here that's not beautiful. I mean, it really is all great. And it all looks so different from the water than it does from land. And I pinch myself that I live here and I get to go out on the water all the time. It's all beautiful.
I'm jealous. We might have to come and visit one day when you're taking the boat out.
Sounds good.
Jamie?
Yeah, really the same thing. That's a hard thing to kind of pinpoint. It's at different times and different parts of the day. There's really some dramatic coastline all along this state. Just out of the Millbridge area, honestly, I've had people that have been on the water all over the place, and I've given them some of the prettiest cruises they've ever had in their lives, just with some of the islands and cliffs. Again, the weather and time of day. To go outside of my element, I guess if you're cruising over towards the Bar Harbor area, you go through what's called Somme Sound. That's a beautiful cruise up through the Somme Sound area. With high mountains on either side. That's really cool. So I guess that would be my best answer.
All right, and guys, you can chime in on the next question that I'm going to ask the ladies because I think they have more kayaking experience. Easiest kayak for somebody who is relatively new to sea kayaking, wants to get out on the ocean, where would you send them?
It's probably a Karen question, I would say.
This is someone who hasn't kayaked?
Somebody with some experience we'll go with, but new to the area, whether they've moved here, whether they're a visitor, but they want to get out they have a sea kayak, they've brought it. Where would you send them that isn't a scary thing because they're new to the area?
Boy, that's, you know what? what happens is everything is so alluring. I mean, we have a 12-foot tide here, and it's higher as you go further up the coast. So I always tell people, like, early in the season, you're better to be on lakes sometimes, because the water doesn't actually move. Our water's always moving. You know, I might give someone some pointers of some places to go in Castine, but then I certainly would talk to them about what time slack tide is and what time the current's going to be running. You know, we have a backshore beach in Castine that's a relatively protected bay, and as long as you don't go to the outside of it and you watch the tide, that can be nice. I mean, there's so many beautiful places. Again, I think, you know, you're looking every time when I'm looking for whether I'm going to take an experienced group or a challenging group, I'm looking at what's the wind doing? What's the tide doing? You know, are we going to be in the lee of the wind? So, you know, like Blue Hill Bay is really pretty in the harbor when the tide is high and it's not windy and it's slack tide. Yeah, I know it's hard for me to say there's no easy place. It's important to have to understand the water.
Yeah.
And really early in the morning is a good time because the water's calmer, and at sunset the water's calmer because the wind dies.
Suggest maybe just a spot that is, you know, somewhat protected, obviously conditions, you know, depending on conditions, but off of Stonington, kind of like there's this area like Merchant Row where there are many islands, and you can launch right in Stonington, and many of the islands are public access, so they're on the main island trail. So there are, it's kind of like there's always options if you want to stop at any point. So you're never necessarily in the same feel as like open ocean, maybe like a little, what might be a little more frightening for someone who's unfamiliar with the area. But I mean, I know many kayakers who that's like the mecca for kayaking in Maine. It is like indescribably gorgeous. So I would say, you know, it is relatively, I don't want to say like beginner friendly, but it can cater to someone who, you know, is not ready to maybe do some more open water type paddling.
You know, the whole thing about the open water, Stonington is gorgeous. And actually we just booked a trip with a family and they have young kids and it's so fun to go from island to island there. It is really gorgeous. But so most kayakers aren't doing like open water paddling. Like you were saying, you like to stay in the bays. I like to stay along the bays too and near islands. And, you know, we're not really paddling like out into the middle of nowhere. I mean, you want to bebop from island to island. That's what's beautiful about kayaking. The shoreline is what's gorgeous.
All right, next question. Somebody who has sea kayaking experience who wants to do a multi-day trip. Where would you tell them to go?
Stonington.
Yeah, that is sort of dovetailing off of that, but Stonington, like super great spot because of just the sheer density of islands that have camping availability, you know. So there's always kind of like, even if you plan your trip, you're going to go to this island first night, this island second night, sometimes it's full, you know, like maybe there's already campers there. And Stonington is great because there are a lot of other options. You know, there's always kind of like a second option available as opposed to maybe other bays that have fewer islands that have camping.
Yeah, I would second that. And when we're running a group and we want to have a lot of options like this family, we choose that because we don't have to be, we know we don't have to get 6 miles to the next place. That there's just nice little islands to stop all along the way. So it is really nice. You can also launch at Naskeg and do the other side of Stonington without really doing big crossings. And yeah.
All right, there was one question we didn't get to, and that is honestly by design, unless somebody knows about this, but Jim had a question about the Butler Conservancy, and I'm not sure anybody here has any information on that. So Jim, if you don't mind us taking that offline or holding on to the next panel, we might have some information on that. But before I wrap up, round robin, is there anything that we didn't cover that you think someone should know before planning to come up here and try to get out on, whether it's a sea kayak or a boat, or go puffin watching or whale watching? Alex, parting advice to anybody.
I guess if people are up visiting, and every tour will tell you this, but people may not believe it. I don't know, but bringing extra clothes, because it's almost always colder out on the water. I always have emergency sweatshirts on board, and just because people aren't prepared and they get cold, and that's no fun. So that's what I would say.
I know that from the ferry going from Campobello to Deer Island. Yes, I completely agree. Christina?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a multitude of kind of safety things that come to mind, like don't forget your chart and get a VHF radio and, all these things. But I'm just going to sort of do like a shameless plug for MITA, because, the guidebook that we have and the information that we have about these islands that are accessible and, they're open to the public is really quite remarkable. And so if you're lucky enough to have your own boat when you're visiting this region, or you've just moved here and you invest in a boat, the guidebook can give you some really remarkable places to visit. And that, being on the water is just such a truly special experience, but also visiting, an island, I think, is really magical. And I know a lot of people really treasure those experiences when they get out and they're able to visit some of these places.
That's awesome. I want to go visit an island now.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. There's lots.
I don't even know how to swim. I'm not sure a kayak is a good idea.
We do get a lot of people that kayak with us that don't swim. In fact, I had this woman that used to come for years and years, and she would only come out with us at night. We run these nighttime tours to see the bioluminescence. Our bay is very bioluminescent. And I said, have you ever thought about coming out during the daytime so you can see what you're seeing? And she's like, I couldn't deal with that because I can't swim. But, she had a life jacket on. It's another way to enjoy the water. We do get lots of non-swimmers, actually. Yeah.
Jamie, any parting?
Just to do it. You definitely want to get out on the water, whether it's, in a motorboat or a sailboat or a kayak or going to the beach. I mean, Maine that's one of the gifts that Maine has. We have so much water.
Jamie?
I guess the one thing I could say I don't know if it's advice or maybe this is just a comment. I get a lot of feedback, hear a lot of feedback from, lobster fishermen, because as I'm running my tours, I have a couple different radios on the VHF going, and I have a lot of lobster fishermen friends, and, I monitor a couple different channels, and I find this as well with kayakers sometimes. Given what time of day it is, sometimes it's really hard to pick out kayaks, the visibility. And I've had it happen myself. So I don't know if there's anything we could do different. We're always trying to be on the alert. But as far as any advice to people on kayaks, if they're out on their own, just be aware of the lobster fishermen and the traffic because of where you're going. If you see a lot of boats out in the middle of the bay working an area, working their string of traps from, say, north-south, maybe not kayak across their path, just because they're busy. Their heads are going back and forth between their traps and trying to find their buoys. And if the sun's right off the water or the fog's right, things can get tough to see. So, just being aware of your surroundings, everybody being aware of your surroundings would be my biggest piece of advice.
Can I add a little thing to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, that's something that we always teach our kayakers, the rules of the roads. And I would say that in Stonington, if you're sending people to Stonington, that's one of those areas where kayakers need to know that we can paddle where big boats can't go. So we want to be where the big boats can't go. And when we make crossings, We want to cross the narrowest crossing straight line and look both ways like you're crossing a highway. And a lot of people don't realize in Stonington, there are some places where islands are very close together that are the major thoroughfares. So it's really important, and I know that Maida, you know, has information about that kind of thing, to really make people aware of talking to locals and finding out where the traffic is and what time do the lobstermen come back in. Because man, when they go by, they create huge waves, and you know, inexperienced paddlers need to like deal with that. So, you know, staying out of the boat channels is really important, and understanding who has the right of way.
So Karen, I don't mean to cut you off, but we're at the top of our hour and 15 minutes. And I want to thank our panelists. This was our second one, and this was great. And we appreciate you being part of this. Our next one will be on April 28th, same time, same registration process via Zoom. And it will be on freshwater fishing and birding, because, you know, sometimes the husband wants to fish and the wife rather look at birds. So we're going to cover both topics at the same time, or it could be vice versa, because, you know, I've been known to fish before, and I don't know if my husband actually fishes. So we're going to explore things from more of the freshwater side. And the other thing is we have our annual photo contest. This will be our second annual one. It is going to kick off unofficially tomorrow, officially when I get the press releases done. And our photos will, you know, we're going to ask you guys when you're on the water, take some photos with yourself, another paddler, another boater. Hey, you know, Alex, you got a daughter and you got a dog. Both would be perfect, because we want to see people enjoying the DownEast Acadia region. That could be animals, that could be humans, but we definitely want something besides a sunset, because we have beautiful sunsets, but you know what? That sunset could basically be anywhere. So we want to see people experiencing DownEast Acadia region. Again, thank you so much. Christina, I might have to come out to an island. Alex, I'm probably going to hit you up. Monique, I'm probably going to hit you guys up. Jamie, if my dad comes up this year, we're going to try to make a reservation with you. If not, because obviously it's a little weird this year, it might be next year. And Karen, if I'm ever brave enough to get on a kayak, and I've never been to Castine, so it could be fun. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Night, everybody. Thank you.
Hi,
Good
Al.
job.
Can we stop the recording?
Yes.